All right, we are recording. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tasseo-Talk, the show where spiritual professionals spill the tea on their professions. I am here with Abriana Roman of Tarotstrology, and we're going to talk a little bit and answer some questions about astrology and tarot and her journey. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me on this. I'm excited to be answering some of these questions. I know they were like rolling in the Facebook comments, and I was excited to see them all come in as we were putting this together.
Yeah, the majority of them are from Facebook. I've got a couple that I just came up with. But anyway, let's go ahead and get in here. Our first question is actually one that I came up with, just something that I wanted to ask you about. How would you say planetary placements affect personality?
So I think that this is kind of like a polarity thing, right? Because there's always good with bad and bad with good. So of course, you know, we have our placements, our sun sign, moon sign. They all have a bit of like play on how they manifest in our real like life. You know what I mean? You know, everybody's also going to have their own way of how they interpret things, how certain placements will interact. And I think that's what I've like fallen in love with about astrology, is that every reader will have like their own way to interpret things. And I don't know, it's just so very like versatile and it flows so well. But I try to make things very basic so that people can understand it on a level that's not so complicated, right? Because I feel like when people get into astrology, it's always, you know, well, there's so much to learn, and that's very true. There is so much to learn. But when it comes down to it, I like to think of like key terms, right? So for me, it helps me be more fluid with how I'm interpreting a person's chart, because I can just go to simple terms, right? For example, our sun signs, right? They represent ourself, our ego. And a lot of people are familiar with their sun signs, so they can say, you know, oh yeah, I like to use myself as an example, which I've done here several times. I'm an Aries, so that Aries nature is to be like out there and impulsive and so energetic, you know what I mean? And I feel like, again, polarity. So there is some good to that, and then there's also some bad to that. There's also like, yeah, I make some choices that, you know, they're not the brightest choices. Maybe I need to think things more thoroughly. And there was another point I made here too, as I was kind of like writing this out, like when we look at other placements as well, right? Like for example, more generational placements like Pluto. Pluto is a planet that many people will have in the same sign. And in terms of like when we're talking about polarity, like for example, like my generation, like I'm part of that Pluto and Sagittarius generation. So we can see how some of us are, you know, we're out there, we're traveling, we're doing all these fun things. And then there's another handful of us who kind of seem to overindulge, or you know, they embody that Sagittarian Jupiter, because those are the two, that the planet that connects the energy. They embody that Jupiter energy of like overindulging. So it could be on one hand, you're exploring and you're having, you know, a great time and you're doing new things. But then on the other hand, there's like a part of the generation where we see people who, you know, get into partying or doing things that they're not really supposed to be, you know what I mean? That, and kind of like a way to escape. So I think in terms of how it affects us personally, it's always going to be depending on a ton of other stuff as well, right? Because there's a ton of stuff that goes into a birth chart.
Oh, I'm sure.
Aspects, houses. Oh yeah, it's very deep, but it's very fun. And I try to explain to people, like, you know, try not to get too ahead of it, because I feel like a lot of it always will still boil down to very basic terms, like, for me, and I think that's what has helped me along in my journey of learning myself and even sharing it with my following, you know, trying to keep it simple, because I feel like that's the best way to learn, because without, you know, allowing us like a little bit of space to like the fill in the blanks, you know what I'm saying? Like you could be a Virgo, right, and be very organized and structured, but then of course you have to think of all the other ways that this could manifest, where you're picky, or you're, you know, you don't want to do things in a manner that is uncomfortable for you. It can be unique for everybody, so it all kind of ties in, you know, on its own. For everybody's going to be a little bit different. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense to that. Sometimes I feel like when I answer questions, I'm like, I'm just trailing off at this point. But yeah, we're all unique. I mean, we're not all going to have the same things in our charts. We're all going to have different aspects. So it's all going to manifest in a way that we, you know, and it's also our ability to be aware of it too, I think, is another huge thing. Like for the people who are actually into astrology, of course, they're going to look at their charts and question, you know, what things mean, because I think it's also a sign of like, I want to know what I need to do to change or to grow or to be a better person. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's definitely like a polarity thing, because again, there's people who don't even believe in astrology who, you know, who will say, oh, well, I'm a Capricorn, but I don't really feel like, you know what I mean? So it's all what makes us unique. Everything will tie in. I don't believe in like the good and the bad. And I just think it all is just a matter of like how we're able to take it in, how we're able to, you know, express it. And I think a lot of it has to do with open-mindedness too. But yeah, so I hope that answered that. I feel like I kind of have this, that's maybe my Aries self as I kind of go off and trail and start talking about other points. So,
well, that's okay, because you actually answered question number 4 already, which was, do you believe there are bad aspects in a chart, or do you view them differently? Brittany from Facebook asked that one.
This one was number 4. Yeah. So, and that honestly, like I had mentioned before, I feel like a couple things were kind of repeated. Like number 4 is also very similar to number 12, which is like the red flags. What placements do you look for that is a red flag? I don't inherently believe that there's bad or good. Like, again, I think that there is very much a duality and a polarity to everything. You know, to be fair, like, I feel like, you know, we can't necessarily, we all embody things that aren't favorable, right? Like there are things that about myself that I don't enjoy, but I'm not going to say like it's bad. Like I have a Leo moon and I can be very like dramatic or over the top. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that I'm very expressive and passionate. So there are things that we may not like about ourselves, or maybe there are things in a birth chart that seem like, okay, this is not favorable, but that doesn't make it bad, if that makes sense. Like, again, things are also going to have a huge role on like how we're able to perceive it. Like to me, a bad aspect or a hard aspect is considered like a challenge, right? So when I see something that is challenging, I'm not looking at it as, well, I'm never going to be able to, you know, make it through this aspect or transit in my life. I'm never going to be able to fulfill like learning, you know, how to navigate through this, but more so in a sense of like, okay, so for me, right, I'll use myself as an example. I have, which I actually talked about too, not long ago on my account, on my profile, which was the Moon square Venus in a natal chart. This actually was a transit that we had collectively, which caused people to kind of be a little selfish, a little like they wanted people to kind of drop everything and pay attention to them. It's like the me, like pay attention to me. Like that's how I explain it, because that's what I have, and I can see that in myself. And I noticed that collectively that people were kind of experiencing that same energy because it was transiting through the planetary. Excuse me,
You're fine.
I'm so nervous here. I don't know why.
I just treated it like a phone call.
But yeah, so everybody kind of felt that transit collectively, and I noticed it in a lot of my friends. Like they were coming to me, but in a sense of like they didn't want to be advised. They just kind of wanted to be validated in what they were feeling, and that is something that me personally, again, this is a challenging aspect I have to work with, that I've seen. Well, I can't say that I've seen because it's past now. But I've witnessed play out within the last few days, because people really did want that attention on them. They wanted me to like drop what I was doing to feed into whatever they were, going through. And I didn't have that time. And me, with somebody who has that transit in their natal chart, I'm like, listen, this is my life. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't, I understand where you're coming from, where you want to be validated and you want your feelings to be heard. However, there's other ways to get through this, right? Like, sometimes there is value in feedback. So that's kind of where that comes to. So in terms of that specific aspect, sometimes people do have something good to say that will help you in your situation. So you may want to, the moon, right? Our emotions, you may want to express your feelings, Venus, our love, right? We may want to express that, but we have to consider that other people have things going on too. So we can't always expect people to just kind of like drop it and pay attention to us.
Yeah.
And this is where like the bad aspect part comes in. Like, it's not a bad thing. However, it is something that is challenging, and it is something that people must be aware of in terms of wanting to like navigate it.
I completely agree. I get the same thing with some of my tarot clients sometimes. They don't really want advice. They want to justify what they're already doing. And they just want the cards to say that.
Yes. Yeah. I even as a tarot reader myself, like I noticed that in some of my clients, and it's the same. It's no different, honestly. It's just energy in another form. With astrology, it's the same thing. At the end of the day, there's going to be some things that we don't like about it, but it's really not about what we don't like about it, and more so what we're able to do to get out of the challenging perspective of it. Like, okay, this is not a bad transit or not a bad aspect, but it is a little bit difficult. And now I got to kind of figure out how to work my way through it.
Exactly. And that actually brings me to a question a little further down the list. So you do read tarot as well. How would you say astrology influences your readings, if at all?
Excuse me. So yes, I actually love this question, because I have been reading tarot not any longer than I have been reading charts. Like, astrology I've been studying for a long time. Like, this goes back into childhood, but tarot was something that I was a little bit more comfortable with and like I would say well versed in. And I didn't necessarily tie like astrology into it until probably about maybe 6 months to a year after I started reading like for clients. And I started using astrology dice. So I don't know if you're familiar with those. It's kind of like with a 12 side dices. I have a set of them. So it has like the 12 house numbers, all the signs. And then I also have one that has all the planets and some of the lunar nodes on it. So I use those in my readings, which I think is cool, because I have that little touch of astrology in here, and it helps me clarify for my client what areas of their life this may be impacting them in. And then on top of that, I also think it's very interesting to see, as like somebody who practices, divination and doing tarot readings, as well as chart readings and kind of looking at transits and watching for things, how the energy kind of like almost always aligns. And I noticed this too in my readings for clients. Like, I'll notice that some of them will get a reading done and it'll be very heavy, and I'll mention something in the reading because it'll kind of like align with a transit. Like, I know a lot of people were feeling the Pluto entering Aquarius transit, because it's a very I wouldn't say it's huge, life-changing, but it's going to shift society. Pluto is our transformative self, and Aquarius, of course, is the humanitarian. We're looking for a collective purpose here to serve something bigger. So I noticed that when Pluto moved into the sign of Aquarius, a lot of people were coming to me for readings because they were having I don't want to say like spiritual breakthroughs, but they were having these realizations like, okay, there's something else going on. You know what I mean? Like, I can't really explain that apart from Pluto tends to shed light on what is hidden, like the secrets and everything that we don't understand, like the psychological things. And I noticed that a lot of my clients were having either like a dark night of the soul, spiritual awakenings, or even, developing their gifts in a sense because of this collective shift. And I always think that's so cool to see when we're, looking at transits and we're doing readings for clients, because it kind of, like I said, it kind of almost always aligns. And it's just it's nice to have that confirmation that energy truly does not lie to us. Like it's significant. It's always going to have a significant role.
Oh, absolutely. So you mentioned you started reading the charts, or dealing with astrology back in childhood. What got you interested in it in the first place?
So I've always been the weirdo, right? I'm an Aquarius rising, so I like to stand out a little bit. I like to be different.
Okay, I was going to ask you what your rising was.
Yeah. Yes, and it's funny because a lot of Aquarius risings end up in us, like, I'm sorry, I'm like stumbling on my words here. I get a little excited.
Sorry.
They end up in like an astrological profession because Aquarius rules astrology. This is kind of like their like strong suit. But it's unique. It's different. It's not something that many people can explain. But for me, what I found interesting about it and what I absolutely loved about it was because it gave me like a self-discovery key. Like this was literally a key to helping me understand myself. And I think that's what plays a huge role, especially in like a healing aspect of it. Like, this kind of helped me like open myself up, understand myself more, other people as well. I mean, I've have friends who come to me much, before obviously offering it as a service, but practicing on my friends and just being that person that kind of, like understood it in a level where not many people do. And I think that was for myself, right? Because I feel like I was always a misunderstood person. I was always that weird kid, that person that like, I would be by myself a lot, or my friend group was kind of just like everywhere. And it was because like nobody understood me and I wanted to be understood. I wanted to find my place. And I think astrology helped me with that. Like, I think it helped me understand myself, and it helped me understand, the place that I could belong and feel comfortable in even. There's just so much that goes into it that has helped me like develop as a person, and that I would love to continue to share with others, because this is such a great tool for helping understand yourself better.
Yeah, absolutely. I've felt the same way about tarot. I dove into it head first, and I've never let go.
Yes, and that's the same thing too for me too. Definitely, these two, both of them, tarot and astrology. That's why I have the Tarostrology name, because I just have a love for both, like a deep, deep love for both, because they truly have made me so self-aware. They've made me able to reflect, even with the terms of like chart reading and looking into my own like natal chart. Like I've learned so much about myself through learning about astrology. So it's like you're, in a way, like you're doing something enjoyable because it's something that you find interesting, but then at the same time you're like, okay, wow, this actually really does help me, because not only am I learning about what this all means, but I apply that to me. I apply that to myself.
That's awesome. Okay, I'm gonna look through the questions and see if there's any that we haven't answered yet, because they kind of just keep getting answered.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know I have.
No, you're fine.
I'm like, I can.
You're fine. Let's see. Actually, let's go in with one of these more technical questions. We're going to go with number 8. So, Gem City Spiritualist on Facebook asked you to please explain the squares and the triangles and symbols you see in the chart. We don't even know what they are. They look like hieroglyphics.
This one made me laugh because I was like, I can remember learning, like being in my early stages and like being confused like this, because I thought the same thing. I'm like, what is
like
this?
A dream
like,
catcher
this is literally
to me.
Hieroglyphics. It's difficult. I mean, when you're first getting into it too, it's like you don't really understand what it all means. But in all actuality, what it is just a symbolistic form to show aspects in a chart, right? because we've talked about a little bit about aspects briefly. And the aspects in a chart, right, is the energy that flows between planets or houses or whatever. It's a connection. It's what either, makes the energy of a planet more beneficial, or can even have like a more difficult impact on it and make it more challenging to deal with. But those little symbols are just like, they're symbols, obviously, for those words. Like, for an example, I'm sure people are familiar with the triangles and the squares. The triangle is just a symbol for a trine in a chart. The square is a symbol for a square aspect. I know there's like a little star. I think that's like a sextile. The list goes on. But that's all it is. It's just like a simplified way to read it, especially for people who are more like advanced or would consider themselves intermediate. Those symbols will help you see it in a way that you don't have to write it down like, Pluto is squared the moon and vice versa, things like that. So it's just a simplified form to show aspects in a chart, or to kind of like symbolize where they are between planets without having to have like the whole circle chart to look at. And some people, they don't like, I mean, even for myself, I'm not really entirely comfortable with like just looking at a circle chart and seeing an aspect and making the assumption that it's a square, because it could be a semi-square. It could, you know what I mean? It could be, there's so many different aspects that could be made in a chart. The symbols kind of help it be more simplified when you're reading it between planets. So I hope that helps answer that question. It's definitely a little tricky, but then when you realize it, you're like, oh, it wasn't actually not that like confusing.
So just to kind of clarify for my brain, because that, I don't know if that helped me or not. So just to see if I understand it, and to see if someone on the same beginner level as me would understand it.
Yes.
Okay, so when you're looking at the shape, is it basically like a little map or graph of like this point goes to this planet, and then this one also goes to this planet, and then that's how those planets affect each other?
Yes, more so. So basically, kind of like, I guess I'm trying to find like a way to put it where it's not like
is that how like those planets work together on you?
Yes. So aspects, that's what it is. So it's essentially aspects. Those little symbols are symbols for aspects in a chart. So when we're talking about aspects, there are hard aspects, there are soft aspects. A hard aspect is like a square. We'll use that for a quick example.
Okay.
So a square is something that would create a little bit of conflict or tension between energies. But where was I? Yeah, so the square is a confrontational or conflicting energy between two planets. So for example, we'll use the moon and Pluto, because I think that I've already said that. So it's on the top of my head right now. Right. So when the moon, you'll see the symbol for the moon, and then you'll see the square, and then you'll see the symbol for Pluto, and that's kind of how it's read in that sentence, I guess, for lack of a better word. So it's just kind of like a simplified form of what an aspect is, like a symbol for it. The same way, like when we have all of our star signs, and Aries, the symbol for that is a ram, but we don't always write in the word Aries. Like sometimes we'll use the funny little symbol. It's no different from that. It's just like another version of whatever the aspect is.
Okay, that makes sense.
I hope that. Okay, I was going to say, I hope that helps make it more sense. I know it's a little bit complicated, but yeah, no, it's no different from like a symbol for like our star sign. It's just kind of like a way to simplify reading the chart. Those little symbols are to simplify reading it. I don't know. I'm trying to like make it make sense.
It's okay.
It's hard when it's all about astrology, the stars. It's so complex and deep, and yeah.
It's okay. We're not here to teach a whole class anyway. If we don't get the exact everything, it's fine. We'll live. Okay, so you explained aspects. Trinity's Tarot LLC from Facebook did ask to touch on aspects and degrees and deacons. Deacons is in all caps, so I
Yeah.
think that is the important one.
Deacons actually, I don't know. So I just want to go back to make a little bit of a point for me. When I'm reading charts, I try not to make it so complicated. I try to boil it down to the basics because I think that sometimes we tend to overcomplicate things. And I think that's true for a lot of us. Like even in reading tarot, like I feel like a lot of people, even for myself, when I first started learning, I was like, wow, I need to know every single card. I need to know every upright meaning, every reversal meaning. But when the reality hit for me, it was like, maybe I should just trust myself a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Right. So I feel like that's where it is here too. So there are certain things, and this is why I say every reader will have their own style. I do think that they have a role, like they do play a important role, but I don't think it's as significant as people who like dive deep into charts. Like I would consider myself very surface level. Like I would say, this is more for like me to help others understand themselves in a way that's not so complicated. But if there are people who are more intermediate to advanced, interested in things like that, I'm sure they can get into this. But to make it like a Barney style, I don't know if you're familiar with that term. My friends in the Marines use it all the time on me.
Simple, right? Like teach it to me like I'm 5.
Yeah, my friends in the Marines, they always use that on me. I'm like, Barney style. But yeah, so simplified terms. So basically aspects, we kind of touched up on that a little bit. It's just the energy, how it flows between planets, the connections that it makes, whether or not it will make, a certain planet's energy more challenging or more easier to utilize. Whereas degrees can have a bit of an influence on planets and signs as well. And again, to use myself as an example, like I have my Aquarius rising at 22 degrees. So each degree is kind of ruled by, or not ruled, but more so influenced by a sign's energy. My rising being Aquarius is at 22 degrees, and 22 degrees is a Capricorn degree. So this could manifest in a way where, like, although I am a weird, outgoing person, I am also very serious, and I try my hardest to be structured. Am I? No, but I try. I try to get, responsible. So the degrees, they just have a little bit of an influence on how the energy manifests as well. So each degree will hold a certain sign or planet's energy that will have an influence on it. Deacons is another thing that's very similar to that. So they influence each each sign. Okay, so the deacons, right? So the deacons are, each sign is split into 3, right? So for example, we'll start with Aries. Aries has the 3 deacons, of the first being between March 21st and March 30th. This deacon is influenced by the planet Mars. Second deacon, which is March 31st through the 9th, is influenced by the sun. And then the third deacon of Aries is the 10th through the 19th, which is influenced by Jupiter. So again, you kind of see where it all kind of like trickles down into very similar concepts where, the deacons, the degrees, the aspects, they're all influences to how something will manifest. So for me, I was born April 15th. So I'm a 3rd deacon Aries. So Jupiter has some influence on to how my Aries impulsivity manifests. So for me, I'm very much somebody who likes to start a lot of things that I don't finish, right? Projects. I'm constantly learning, constantly buying books that I never finish opening. So that's that, the Jupiter influence of wanting to learn more or wanting to absorb or take in more, yet I'm still very much the Aries who is impulsive and can't, maintain like a structured path onto what I want to take in, which is, again, the thriving in chaos, I like to call it. So I hope that kind of helped answer that. Like I said, I feel like everybody is going to have their own style to reading, and some people will consider this as significant and others won't. To me, I look at it and I do think it has a bit of an influence, but I don't think it's something that is super deep. You know what I'm saying? It's not something that is going to have a huge shift on how a person's personality is manifested.
That makes sense. Okay, so we've got a few little technical questions like that. I'm not going to make you sit here and teach a whole class.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking that. I'm like, I don't want to go too deep into it because I want people to be able to understand it on a very surface level and not get so like confused by all of the intricate words that astrology has.
Yeah, we definitely don't want to confuse people. If we were going to do that, we might as well start a whole podcast of you just teaching people astrology.
An astrocast.
Yes, not opposed. But let's go back to question 2, and this may have been you did kind of touch on this already. But in what ways, as an astrologer, do you try to rise above your natal chart and be different than the labels put on you by astrology? That's Ashley on Facebook. So I would take that, since you've already kind of gone over that a bit, I would say maybe apply it more on a personal level and maybe give some examples. Oh, if you're comfortable with that.
So I actually, excuse me, sorry. What'd you say?
Oh, I was just saying if you're comfortable with it.
Oh yeah, no, I'm an open book girl. Like I'm not a secret keeper. That's my Leo moon. I can tell you like TMI stories and be totally unfazed by it.
Nice.
But I think for me, in a sense, like like we talked about earlier, like I don't really see anything as bad or good, but I take the good with the bad and the bad with the good. Like I feel we all should. And I feel that, in terms of like the labels being put onto like ourselves, I think that sometimes we tend to do that to ourselves, and that kind of falls in play with how I feel about like the quote unquote bad aspects of a chart or the red flags. We tend to do that to ourselves. Like, and again, I feel like it's a learning experience. Like we're going into this and we're learning about astrology and ourselves because we want to learn more. And I feel like in terms of trying to rise above, like maybe even expectations, even like, again, like it's not, I don't think it's anything that has to be so intricate and deep to where you're over absorbing, but it's just something that is very fun, something that is very, enjoyable to help you understand yourself. And it's going to really boil down to your ability to like utilize the information you have, or what you're learning, or however you read charts. If you get a chart reading done from another person, it's going to be your sole responsibility to take that and do something with it beneficial or do nothing with it. So I wrote something silly here because I was like, to compare it to cooking, right? Because when we're cooking, we don't, like, I think labels can help us to an extent. Mm-hmm. When we're cooking, we don't go and use random seasonings. We don't go and pick the one with no label and just put it into our chicken. Like, we want to make sure we know what we're doing or what we're putting in when we're making food, right? And that's kind of a little comparable to the labels in astrology. Like, sometimes it's good because it gives you a clear directive as to what you need to take in, or what you know what I mean? Like what you need to understand about something. Like if you think something is bad, okay, well, what is bad about it? Is there something that you don't understand about it that's making you confused? Have you heard negative things? Like it's going to really be more about how you perceive it and how you want to make changes so that you're able to better understand yourself, and to use this more as a tool and not as something that is, like, I guess I feel like I have like a lack of words for this one, but not to put anything negative onto yourself or your chart, because it's not negative. It's just a bit of a bump that you're going to have to learn how to navigate.
Right. And like you used that cooking example, to kind of throw in some of my cooking preferences. I personally am not the biggest fan of cilantro. I don't have the soap gene, just not a big fan of the taste. However, there are some things that I like cilantro in, like salsa or on tacos. So you can't say overall cilantro is a terrible herb because, maybe you're just not pairing it with the right things, or maybe you just don't know
Exactly.
how you mesh with it.
Excuse me. Exactly. Yes. And that's exactly why I made that comparison, because it's like there's so many possibilities, so many ways to pair it with something else that may work. And then of course, like you just said, it may not be something that you want or that you desire or that you enjoy, but that doesn't mean that it's bad. Maybe it's just not for you.
Yeah.
So exactly that. Exactly that.
Exactly. I will pull one more technical question, because it was the one you were so excited about learning about yesterday.
Oh, yes. I know what we're going for. Yay!
What is a Hades moon, and how can you tell if you have it? Bewitched on Facebook asked that.
So this Hades moon, this was new for me. And I was honestly, that's what I love about astrology is like, you're always learning something new, and it's always so eye-opening. This Hades moon, I actually found out about through this question, because I may have seen it somewhere, but I didn't think anything like significant of it, because again, I like to be very surface level, because I know a lot of my following is beginners and they're still learning. So I like to relay that in a way that is easy for them. But this was just something that was like mind blown. But the Hades moon, I found out through some research, is when Pluto, which is Hades, the underworld, when it makes an aspect to your moon sign. So I actually went ahead and looked at my chart, and I saw that, yes, I have Hades moon in my chart, which is Pluto in a trine with my moon. So any aspect I read was either, a positive aspect, which is a good one, a trine, or a sextile, or a negative, quote unquote, I would, again, use it lightly, a square, or, a conjunction or an opposition. Any aspect really between the moon and Pluto is going to signify Hades moon. And what this is a mother wound. And I'm going to see if I actually have it open, because I really like the article that I had found about that. Excuse me. And it signifies a mother wound. I think I sent it to you actually. Yes,
you did. I've got it
in the chart. So this is karmic astrology here. So when I was reading this, I was absolutely shook. Like my pants were shat in. Like I was like, how did they write this article about me? Like, how does this person know my life? And it says here too. So it's not just aspects between Pluto and the moon. It also has anything to do with like Pluto in Scorpio or in the 8th house as well. Any aspects that will make to that. And this is a mother wound associated with like matriarchal traumas. So for me, when I was like reading this, I was like, I couldn't stop thinking about like generational trauma that has occurred with a woman in my family, and how I have taken like a profound dedication to healing, like specifically the wound that has been in the woman's side of my family for generations, and to make it a more spiritual experience and to understand on a more spiritual level. This is actually something, as I was reading this, I don't know if maybe when you post the cast that you can post the article like in the comments or something, because this was really super. Yes, this was super, super interesting to read, because I read in it, this is a placement of shadow workers and healers. This is karmic debt carried through the womb. So this has a significant impact to me, and I'm grateful for this question, because it really made me aware to a lot of things. The people with this placement tend to go through a lot throughout their childhood, throughout their life. They tend to experience a lot of hardships, or even the relationship with their mother. And it's like and I'm reading here too, it's funny because it says the Hades moon child comes into the world feeling unsafe. The womb specifically is an unsafe place to be, and most Hades moon children and mothers have traumatic births. And to make this even like astrology is real. My mother, I was due on April 1st. She was very young when she was pregnant with me. I think she was maybe 17. And I did not come on my due date. I actually came 2 weeks late. So I was born on April 15th. So I was born 2 weeks after my due date. And I did not want to leave the womb. Like, I just refused. I was refusing that's why I was 2 weeks late. They had to force me out. Like, I didn't want to come. But they literally fight to not incarnate again, because they know of the trauma on a spiritual and soul and karmic level. They're familiar with the trauma that is coming through with them in this lifetime that they are essentially responsible for healing. So this was a super, super interesting question. And I absolutely loved reading about this. Like, I wish I had the time to just read the whole thing for everybody, but I'm going to send it to you so you can link it, because wow, it was super, super deep. And that question, that was a good one.
Anything you want to send for resources to put in the description to kind of help people out, feel free. I will put it in there. It's going to go on Spotify and YouTube. Maybe some others.
I love this. I'm also going to shout out some books too, because I know that resources was one of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about as well. I know that one of the questions had a lot to do with that too. It was number 5. What advice or resources do you recommend for somebody wanting to become? And again, like, a lot of the stuff that I've taken in is very like self-taught. Like, of course I've taken a class. I've taken, I'm over here in my head. I've taken one class. I've taken several, I've outsourced, I guess is a better word to use, going out into the community, libraries, getting books, especially if it's like a book that I want to spend the money on, but I'm not sure of. You'd be surprised what you could find in your library. I've found so many great astrology books that I've ended up purchasing after the fact. But just a couple to mention, like an honorable mention was Astrology for Dummies, which I'm sure everybody's pretty familiar with the For Dummies series. They have an astrology book, which is probably one of the best, hands down, informative books that I've read for astrology. That, and then there's one that's quite literally named The Only Astrology Book You'll Ever Need. And then The Secret Language of Astrology are top 3 books I would recommend for anybody learning astrology, especially at a beginner level that wants to go from beginner to advanced, because these books very much break down things in a manner that is not like, you don't have to take it in all at once. I mean, I know for me, my learning style, I'm very, hands-on, and I don't like to do things in a structured order. Like, I kind of like to learn at my own pace. And I like that about these books, that I can just pick them up and flip through them if I, am looking for something specific, or if I want to sit and read through a chapter, I also can do that. But they're very informative books that you don't have to feel obligated to sit through, if that makes sense.
Real quick, there is one other question that I just feel like I would like to personally know the answer to. This one is also from Bewitched on Facebook. She says she knows what a stellium is, but is there a name for when it's more than 3? I personally do not know what a stellium is, and I'm sure lots of other people don't either.
So with the stellium question, as far as her question concerning more than 3 in a chart, I don't think I've ever seen that. I think it is possible, but I do think it's rare. At most, I've seen 1 or 2 in a chart. And a stellium, what it is when 3 planets are in the same sign or the same house. So, for example, again, to use myself, is I have an Aries stellium. I have my Aries sun, I have an Aries Venus, and I have Saturn in Aries as well. So this would just amplify the energy of Aries. So a stellium is kind of like, are you familiar with crystals?
Yes.
A stellium is like the clear quartz of
Okay, crystals. So it gives a
boost. It's just an amplification of the energy. And yeah, I'm not sure about more than 3, but it could occur in the same sign or the same house. And when it's in the same house, some people, or some astrologers, I should say, they don't read in a whole signs chart. A whole signs chart, you'll more likely see the stelliums in the sign versus a Placidius chart where you would see stelliums either in a sign or in a house. So, for example, if it's in a house, it could be, you know, for me in my Placidius chart, I have my stellium in a second house, but it's not all in Aries. It would be my Aries sun and Saturn, but then it has I think my Mercury. I can't even remember. There's so many charts, girl. But it has another planet, but it's in a different sign. It's in Taurus, but it's still in the second house. So it's a second house stellium, but it's not all in Aries, if that helps clarify that. So the second house rules values, right? It rules like our moral, it rules like even our financial security. So this would mean somebody who has a second house stellium is more likely to be more like financially secure or seek material comfort. It just amplifies that energy. So again, it's the clear quartz of astrology. It just amplifies and makes more prominent, like it makes it more prominent in your personality or how it will manifest.
Okay, that makes sense. I have several Virgo placements, so that explains me.
No, that makes sense for you too. You're like, we have this time, and I'm over here like, don't worry about it, girl. Like, that's what I'm saying. You know, I can definitely pick up the Virgo in you because it's like, you're like, we have the scheduled time. I have my little intro. I have my way of doing things. Virgo is the sign of routine, right? It's the sign of service, the sign of structure. So this is very normal for a Virgo influence, which I praise and admire because I'm the exact opposite. I just have all the lack of that.
I sent you my chart a little while back. Looks like mid-January, just to kind of show you why I am the way that I am.
Yeah, I remember, girl. I remember seeing that Virgo Venus.
Yes, Virgo Venus, Virgo Mercury. Technically, my sun, it depends on the app that I use. Sometimes it says Virgo, sometimes it says Leo. 9 times out of 10, it says Virgo. But let's see. It says it's my ascendant too, but not 100% sure. But it's my Chiron. It's all over the place.
I see it. I'm looking at it right now as we're talking to Mercury and Virgo. Oh, I love an earth sign Mercury. I have my Mercury in Taurus. We can be earth sign Mercuries are very much like they know what they're saying, like holds like value and holds like some truth because it takes them forever to come to terms with what they need to say. Like we take so long to just like come up with something.
I have so many friends who like will misinterpret what I'm saying because they're used to other people who kind of play games when they're talking. And then I'm just like,
we're very direct. We're like to the point.
I'm just like, here's exactly what I mean in exactly the way that I mean it.
Like there's no cutting corners. I'm not trying to beat around the bush. Like if you don't understand it, then I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. This is the simplest I can make it.
Yes. I have that issue at work a lot too, where I'll be like explaining things as simply as I possibly can. And in my head, I've broken it down to its bare bones. Like this is how I would explain it to a 5-year-old and expect them to understand.
Yes.
And then the people,
literally,
the people I'm talking to, they stare at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, I don't know how to tell you any different.
No, literally. So I empathize with that entirely. I mean, mine isn't in Virgo, but I have my Mercury Taurus, which is an earth sign. So I get it. I totally get that.
It's so nice when people relate.
Oh, yeah. No, girl. I feel like for me, and I think that's what I love about doing this and getting into tarot and astrology is like I felt so called to do this because it helps me relate to people. Like people have no idea like how well I can relate to them until like they hear me talk, right? Because it's like nobody would ever know, you know, I have all this knowledge, or nobody would ever know, you know, I know this, that, and the third, or I'm, you know, experienced in this, or I've been through that. And it's just nice to have like a way to connect with people that makes you like, it's a little unique too. Like it's just it's just fun. I don't know. I love this stuff. I love talking about this stuff, and being able to just like have people within the community even too to like relate to, and to just find like happiness in the fact that there are people out there who enjoy this stuff just as much as I do. So it's fun. I love it.
Good. I'm glad you've enjoyed doing this podcast with me, and I want to go ahead and extend the invitation.
Oh, I love this. Thank you.
Later months.
Thank you. I know. We can definitely do something again too. So don't ever feel like, hesitant to reach out. I'm happy to join you again for a later episode or something along those lines. But I so enjoyed this. This is so fun.
So one more thing before I let you go. I'm sure that other people are going to want to know this too. How much do you personally charge for, say, breaking down the chart to someone who wants like a reading, but like wants it broken down to the point where a 5-year-old could read it?
I try to do that no matter what, no matter who's booking, simply because I like to relay the information on a level where everybody can openly understand it. And I don't charge much for my readings. My mini chart assessment, I think is $25. Gosh, I haven't even looked at my menu in a while. Forgive me for that one.
That's okay. I'll put the updated info in the description instead.
Well, I've been working on a website, so there's been like a lot of changes happening. So I don't really have like it set in my head right now. So because I'm trying to make the transition from booking through like DMs to going to a direct website.
What are you thinking about using?
Ready, I think by. I'm sorry?
What are you thinking about using?
Oh, so I actually found Snipfeed to be like more catered to like what I want to do, because I still want to operate the way that I have been with how I execute readings. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't find anything that was like, I don't like the appointment style, because I have 4 kids. I have so much going on. I don't really have time to just sit and do something at a specific time. I like to be able to relate to my clients like, hey, I need a couple days to do this, or I can have it done tonight and I'll send it this way. And Snipfeed, I just thought like was really suited for that, because I could still execute my readings in that same manner, but I could still have it also like in a more structured and organized like environment through the website. And I like it so far. Maybe I can even send it to you to look at. It's not live yet. I still have a lot of editing to do. But I really do like it. I like the setup, and maybe even for you too, because I know you read, and I know you do all that stuff. So maybe it's something you could consider for yourself if you're ever thinking about changing it up a bit.
I'll definitely look at it. Yeah. We're currently using Acuity scheduling for the Violet Flame. We like it because we've got multiple calendars and like multiple readers doing the same website. But I'm always, interested in learning new programs, and I am a structure junkie, as you can tell. But I am getting to the point where maybe for my side readings, because I'll do it sometimes where I just need extra money, where I'll do it for like my personal instead of going straight to the business. So I might look into it for that.
100%. Yeah, and I've been running everything, through DMs and making the transition. I made a little bit of tweaks to the menu, but I try to keep it affordable, because as a mom too, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I've been a stay-at-home mom for years. Mm-hmm. I know that not everybody is going to come and scrape up with hundreds of dollars to have a chart reading done, which I know is it's not a bad price, and this is obviously you want to pay for quality work, but at the same time, I have always tried to keep it affordable for people. So the max I charge for a chart reading is $50, and that's like all your placements and some mentionable aspects. And then I charge the mini for $25. So I try to keep it in a range where it's not like you're spending a pretty penny just to get, a few pages of work. I'm sure at some point in the future, I'll have to increase the pricing depending on, how much more I can give in a reading. But again, I don't like to over complicate it for people, especially if they're beginners and this is something that is their first time, right?
Right.
I want to keep it simple for them.
I might have to book with you at some point to find out my which side of the cusp I really fall on.
Yes, I have. And that's going to be another thing too. Like, I feel like a lot of people who are born on the day that the sun transitions, it's going to really boil down to the exact time and hour that you were born, and the time zone as well too. Like, I have a friend, I think I told this to you like in the messages, but I have a friend who had thought she was a Pisces like her entire life. Like, she had a Pisces tattoo and everything. And I did her chart reading and I was like, no, honey, I'm sorry to tell you, but you're an Aries because of the time that you were born. I think she was born later in the morning when the sun was actually moved into Aries, and that's where her confusion was, and she finally got her assessment done. And yeah, we found out she was an Aries sun, moon, and rising. So I was like, even better. I was like, yay!
All the Aries. You're an Aries through and through. Oh my god.
Yeah, she is.
I will definitely have to book a reading with you on that then, because I will die on the hill that I am a cusp and that cusps exist, but I would like to know which side I fall on, because I know for a fact that I'm too much of a Virgo to be a Leo sun, but I'm also too much of a Leo to be a Virgo sun.
Yeah, I know. I can see where the confusion is for you too, because you're very outgoing and you have that very Leo bubbly personality, but at the same time you still have that like composure and maintenance of Virgo. So it's definitely a cuspy thing.
I will die on the hill that cusps exist and we are valid, but I know not everyone and has that.
Fairness too. I feel like cusps and the deacons, like, I think that's why people will say, like, look at your deacon more than they'll say, like, oh, cusp. You know what I'm saying? So if you're, like, for a first deacon Leo or, like, a third deacon Virgo, you never know. But, yeah, it can be fun to learn.
Absolutely. But I won't keep you too much longer. You have a fantastic night, but is there anything else that you want to talk about before we get off of here?
Not that I can think of, but I do want to thank you so much for the opportunity and the time, and I'm super grateful to have made the connection. And again, if you ever want to do another episode, just feel free to reach out to me. This was so fun, and I'd love to like chat more about things like this. So yeah,
here in a couple months when I don't have anyone lined up, I think I've got people lined up through July because it's only a once a month thing.
No, that's totally okay. It gives me time. I have a big thing in July too, so you let me know when you're ready, and I'll
probably be August.
Yeah, I'm down for that.
On my birthday episode, we'll do it on my birthday. Just
we can read our chart then. Chart reading for you.
Oh, that sounds like so much fun.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Free publicity in exchange for chart reading?
Heck yeah. All right, girlfriend.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a fantastic night.
You too.
Bye. And that concludes this episode of Tasseo-Talk. Thank you so much for listening, and be sure to tune in next month. Featured in this episode were myself, Chrissy Ball, and my special guest, Abriana Roman. The music you hear is courtesy of freestockmusic.com and features A Midsummer's Night in the Woods by Justin Allen Arnold. If you enjoyed this interview and would like to hear more like it, along with exclusive content and announcements, you can support us on patreon.com/thevioletflamedivinehealing and visit our other websites on our Linktree at linktree/TVF Divine Healing.